evening, and welcome to the Marty Heiser Show. You know, usually I have a lot to say, but tonight the studio here on 5 Shelter Rock Road in Danbury, Connecticut is being graced by a man who has spent 12 years in the Connecticut legislature and 22 years in the U.S. Congress. I think you probably want to hear more from him than me. I know it's hard to imagine, but that's what I've come.
Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath.
Before,
this is still your show.
I understand. It is the Marty Heiser Show, and you know, I don't get paid for this, but we have former Congressman Christopher Shays, who's joining us this evening, most likely for the full hour. There is a Palestinian pastor driving somewhere around there, but he has not found the studio. So unless he shows up, you got the ball, baby.
Is this a joke?
I'm not kidding. You'll meet him. His name is AJ. But let's focus on you because it's all about Chris Shays. So thank you for joining us, and Congressman, I just want to thank you so much.
As soon as you get here, am I kicked out? Or
We bumped the guy from Stanford. He's a Palestinian evangelical pastor. Come on, how can you beat that?
I can't.
You got to go. But as long as he's not here, we're all okay. Okay, enough with the levity. Let's get down to this because this country's in trouble.
It is in trouble.
This state is in trouble. And you have the experience and know-how. I've done some research on you besides knowing you for some time now. I mean, you know, indirectly. We don't take vacation together, but we know each other. I have your cell phone number. But you have been called a maverick. You've been called an independent thinker. When you went against, who was that congressman from Texas, the wacky guy that's now doing Dances with the Stars, LaHaye or something like that?
Tom DeLay.
Tom DeLay. You went against him when it wasn't popular. You supported the president when he was doing the surge in Iraq when it wasn't popular with the left wing. You went against some right-wing patriarchs of the party. You take tough stands, and I think that's why at one point you were the only Republican congressman in the New England states. Now you're coming back, and there's an open seat for the United States Senate. Why do you think you would be the best candidate, and what's your vision, not only for Connecticut, but for the country?
You know, I was thinking you were saying such nice things. I thought, why don't you keep going on?
I'm telling you, Chris, we need some help.
We do need some help.
We need some help. The economy's tough.
We've got the greatest country in the world. And we have citizens that love their country and, you know, work hard every day. And we have a government that's failing them. And what's happened is our leaders, candidly, have put their own personal agendas and they've put their own partisan agendas ahead of the interest of the American people. And what we're doing is we're bankrupting our country, and we're promising our children and their children benefits they will never have. And it doesn't have to be this way. And we've almost accepted, and I think some actually have accepted the fact that they think that our kids aren't going to have as good a futures as we looked forward to. And that's just baloney. It's not a pie we have to redivide. It's a country that has every reason to expect that it can grow and prosper. So I'm running because I want my country back. I want all Americans to have this dynamic, opportunity-filled country back. And I'm not sitting on the sidelines. And I am doing this full-time. I'm having a ball. I'm doing it with my wife. And you know, what we need to do is we need to get our country back on track and our fellow Americans back to work. And you do that, I'm just quickly, and then we can talk in greater detail, you get your country's financial house in order, and you don't take 18 years to do it like one proposal or 23. You reinvest in the infrastructure of our country, not just the roads and bridges, but our seaways, our airports, our electric grid. But you plan for it. It's long-term, not short-term stuff. This third thing you do is you become totally energy independent. You become energy independent, you're going to create more jobs, you're going to lower the cost to manufacture because you have greater supply. We'll be more competitive in the rest of the world. You know, our big costs aren't labor costs. Our big costs are, in some parts of the country, energy. And then the last thing is we need to transform Washington with less regulation, less red tape, and finally, once and for all, a simpler tax code. You know, with some Americans paying something where they pay nothing now. I mean, when you get less than 50% of the American people literally paying an income tax, that's pretty frightening.
The phone number here is 438-2003. If you have a question for Congressman Chris Shays, please do not hesitate to call in. 438-2003 will put you right on the line. We are joined by Professor Jim Bolano. He's a professor of political science at Wisconsin University, and he may have some questions for you as well.
Okay, so what do you teach? What do you teach?
Mostly American government, but a little bit of everything. Some world government and legislative process.
And are your students interested? I mean, do they really interact? Do you have great discussions?
It depends. I'm also the advisor to the campus Republicans, and they couldn't find a registered Republican on campus, so they took the independent, and I went down. And I take them down to CPAC every year.
Terrific.
And, so that group is very much energized and involved. The kids taking U.S. Government 102, it's a requirement. A lot of times it's tough sledding, but this is a good year for it, because it's an election year. But I would ask you, given that it is an election year, and you've committed to a primary, I believe, no matter what happens. So given what you've seen in the presidential primary kind of, boxing match that we're seeing, and then going into the fall with whoever the candidate is, the mud wrestling. And how do you get away from the distractions? In other words, the press has been obsessing on this kind of idea of contraception. You're talking economics, you're talking getting Washington in shape. How do you avoid, as a candidate, the distractions that are going to knock you off message?
First, let me say, I've never, ever done a negative ad against an opponent, so I'm not going to start now. But
Democrat or Republican? We're not talking just primary.
Democrat or Republican. I've never done it.
Wow.
And some people make an assumption because I haven't done that, then I'm not willing to get into the fight, which surprised me. I thought some people would appreciate it, and some do, I think. Having said that, elections are about differences. Why you over someone else? And if you start hearing people say, well, we can't talk about this or we can't talk about that, it's an absurdity. So, on the surface, someone could say, well, you've been there too long, you're a career politician. I could say to someone else, you have no experience. I could say to someone else, you're a lawyer. I could say, we have too many millionaires in Washington. All of that is irrelevant. What's relevant is, what have you done and what will you do? And so I think we'll have some very spirited debates in the Senate race. And I'm certainly going to point out that experience matters. We have gridlock that's foolish. Sometimes you do want gridlock. I mean, if Republicans say, I want to cut taxes, and Democrats say, I want to spend more, and they both agree to get it, what you've had is bigger deficits. It's just dumb. And then you'd almost want gridlock.
Do you think, because I looked through some of your literature for this Senate campaign, do you think some of this sort of hard medicine approach is going to resonate with the taxpayers, with the residents of Connecticut right now? I mean, it gets a little ethereal sometimes, and there seems to be I want what's coming to me now. On the Republican side, there's don't you dare take any more money away from me. And you coming in with this practical approach, which makes a lot of sense, but it's like taking cod liver oil.
Okay, no, it doesn't have to be that way. And think
Give us the sugar then that makes it go down.
Well, first off, the truth makes it go down. I think Americans are willing to do anything that's required if they know everybody shares in it, and if everyone shares in it, it's not painful. They just want to know that they're not being asked to do something that others aren't. Ross Perot ran for president. He went to Larry King and he held up a chart and he said, revenues are going this way, expenses are this way, you've got all this gap in here, each year it's deficits, you add the deficit on top and you get big debt. And people understood it. And they empowered us to balance the budget. We did for 4 straight years after Republicans won in 1994. It took us 2 years to get to balance and balance it for 4 years.
And you were there. You were in Congress.
I was right in the center of it, and it was thrilling. But you told the American people the truth. He certainly did. And Americans said, well, okay, do it. Take care of it. And we did it. And we had a partner. We actually had a partner. His name was Bill Clinton. Yeah. And he didn't like some of what we were asking him to do, but he agreed to it. And so we balanced the budget for 4 years. We had welfare reform. We passed the first bill under the new Republican Congress was the Congressional Accountability Bill that New called the Shays Act, because it was my bill with a Democrat who didn't get reelected, Dick Sweat, a very good man, and it put Congress under all the laws that a Democratic Congress had exempted Congress from for 40 years. OSHA laws, sexual harassment laws, time and a half, all that stuff.
Insider trading laws, I think, were one that were somehow overlooked. If I watch 60 Minutes.
Well, if you watch 60 Minutes, you'd know that nobody under our laws is exempt from insider trading. So
except for congressmen.
No. They just haven't prosecuted them. If you have inside information, it's against the law. But the press overlooked the real issue. Some members of Congress were given IPOs. You know, you get the stock, and then it goes public, and your stock goes up. Nancy Pelosi and a few other members, and I said Nancy, a Democrat, there were probably Republicans as well.
Boehner was out there somewhere.
Well, whoever was given a gift, an IPO, was breaking the gift ban. That was a bill that I helped pass. Congress has strict gift ban laws. It has strict lobbying laws. It had some pretty good campaign finance laws. Those were bills that I worked on, and that's kind of what made me a bit of a maverick sometimes. So, you know, I think it's great to clarify you can't have inside trading with members of Congress, but it's already against the law. Why doesn't the administration enforce the law? You know why they don't? They don't want to go after some Democrats and some Republicans because they got to work with them.
Well, they do enforce some laws, not others, which is, I guess, a whole other story. But you know,
well, that's the issue.
Like if it's a law against the Catholic Church or something like that, they tend to come out really strong and champion that issue. Other issues, maybe not so much.
You know, think about it. Congress passed a partisan bill on health care that requires now the government, it thinks, to step in and start to regulate. And really part of the mess of some call it Obamacare, I call it the President's health care bill. Part of it is when you see how you have to enforce it, you realize one more reason why it needs to be repealed.
Yeah, so you're committing to the repeal of Obamacare should you become elected to the U.S. Senate?
It's a partisan bill. It says it's balanced. They got CBO, Congressional Budget Office, said it's balanced. You know how it's balanced? 8 years of revenue, 5 years of spending. So if you match year for year, it's not balanced. And when the president said it wouldn't go to any illegal aliens, he was technically right and morally way off. Because a few weeks later, he went to, candidly, a large Latino group and said, people who are here now illegal, but he doesn't call them that, should be granted a path to citizenship. Well, they're going to then get the health care. You know, some say it's 12 million. I think it's closer to 20 million. So there's not been a lot of honesty in recent years.
I think it was at that part in the speech that one rather rambunctious congressman from Florida stood up and said, "You lie." Right?
Yeah, and I regret, and he knows he regrets saying lie. Lie is not a good way to have a conversation.
Especially not during a speech to the...
But having said that, what the president said wasn't in direct terms truthful.
All right. Well, now listen, what you're telling me, because you're giving me a little glimmer of hope here. You're saying that this hasn't grown so large that it's beyond our control, that we're not just ladling on debt to our children and grandchildren.
We are.
But you got the tiger back in the cage. Bill Clinton was elected in what, 92, and then you had the contract with America in 94, and when you had a Republican majority in Congress, you were able to get this thing back into balance, and we actually had a surplus a couple of years.
For 4 years.
Can it be done again?
Absolutely.
If you're elected to the U.S.
Absolutely,
Congress?
and it has to be done again. Because if we don't, you will just see a larger and larger deficit. We have a huge spending problem. I mean, that no one can deny. And that's why some have said, don't talk to me about taxes until you get spending under control. The problem is you have two kinds of spendings. You have spendings that are annual spending to run the government, too large, our departments are too large. Everyone knows they're too large. And then you have the entitlements. The entitlements are ballooning way out, and we have to address both of them. We need to have government smaller, more efficient, and you know what? That's what they do in the private sector. I was just talking to someone who runs a major Fortune 500 company. He said their revenues went from 11 down to 5 billion. He said, in order to save the jobs of 65% of the employees, he let go 35%. Now revenues have moved up to $8 billion, and he can start to hire some people back. But he had to make a very tough decision. Government doesn't think that way, and it's got to reorient itself.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I said a question about energy independence. Yeah. The blame game from the administration, anyway, the last couple of days has been on speculation in the futures market, and that's causing whatever it is, 50 cents on the gallon of gas. Do you think, okay, in the Keystone pipeline, what would that do to the futures market, number one? And number two, should oil be a commodity that we take out of that the realm, take out of the futures realm? Because it hasn't been there forever.
Well, you know, the answer then is a lot of people buy and they lock into a price so that it won't keep going up and down for them. And sometimes they overpay and sometimes they underpay, but they want a sense of certainty. So you know, there's truth in what everyone says, but it's only part of the story. The fact is that we have a huge possibility that Israel is going to try to take out and destroy the nuclear capability of the Iranian government to build weapons-grade material. If they do that, the price will absolutely go beyond belief. So some speculators are anticipating that. I don't know how you change that fact, because the reality is, in my judgment, Israel is not going to let Iran have a nuclear weapon, or nuclear weapons. So that's one part. The other part of the equation is we need to see that this government wants to increase the supply of fossil fuels and ultimately all other types of fuels.
Domestically. But do you think removing oil from the futures market as a commodity, is that a viable option or not?
I don't really know.
Okay.
I really don't know in the end. I think the bottom line to this is I honestly think what you're going to find is that until we increase the supply of our own domestic fuel, we are going to have serious energy problems. We are spending $1 billion a day buying from overseas. We have 100 to 200 years of supply. So in the 2008 election, I have a strong environmental record, 90% lifetime with the League of Conservation Voters. I basically made the point that we needed to drill, particularly for natural gas, off our shore. And some people thought...
How'd that go over with the Sierra Club?
You know what? It didn't go over well. And it's probably why it took me a few years longer than it should have to make that point. Because Canada gets natural gas off its coast and sells to people in New England.
Right.
How crazy is that? Natural gas, if it leaks, evaporates.
Yeah.
You don't need to have to process it. It's like a tank ready. And we have natural gas throughout our country. If we could lower the price of energy by increasing the supply of domestic fossil fuel until renewables become more competitive, we will be able to see a significant increase in manufacturing in this country.
Do you think President Obama is going to reverse himself on coming out against the Keystone Pipeline?
He probably after the election, if he's still president. And that's
after the election, so it'll be...
He had a choice. He had a choice of doing what was right for the country. And by the way, labor would have been very supportive of it, organized labor.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead, he feared what the environmentalists would say. That's not the best kind of fuel. The processing is not good for global warming, but it's going to be done. So the logic of the president should have been, do we let the Chinese get it, buying off the west coast of Canada with a pipeline there, or do we process it down in the Caribbean processing places that we have, and maybe not be as dependent on Venezuelan fuel and other fuel from overseas?
Yeah, I think with gas prices going up, that's going to be a real Achilles heel for the president going into this election cycle. Okay, here's a scenario. Mitt Romney's a candidate for Republican.
Can I ask, am I
yeah.
coming across here? Is this mic here?
The mic seems to be doing well.
Okay.
Seems to be doing well. If not, we'll work on it because we have the very cutting edge technology here at Comcast Studios. We do not mess around at all. But I think that $5 a gallon gas, if that continues through through the election, that's going to make the.
So one part of it is the cost of the basic raw material, the oil,
yes.
and the other is the processing for natural gas. And what's happened is, not natural gas, but gasoline fuel.
Yeah.
And that is being sold, we process it, and now it's being sold overseas.
Yeah, it's our largest export as of right now.
Right.
It's the largest export. We're exporting gasoline to other countries when we're paying $5 a gallon for it in this country.
And if more of it was being sold here, the price would come down.
It absolutely would. I mean, I finally had an epiphany a few years back when I have an SUV, I filled up the tank, I was on empty, it cost me $100 to fill up the tank. That was my breaking point. That's when I started looking into this.
Didn't I follow your SUV?
Not that one. This was a big one.
Oh,
this was a GMC. This is, I'm downscaled like everyone else. I'm downscaled. I can't, more Democrats in the White House and Congress, I'm going to have to keep downscaled.
Have to get a Volt.
We're eating bologna and canned peaches at our house. I don't know how it is at you, but that's how we're getting by. I'll tell you, it's pretty sad. We need to get this country back onto a little prosperity. But at that point, and I want to get you in trouble with your friends at the Sierra Club, but I started looking into the natural resources we have up in Canada that aren't being exploited, Anwar and some of these other areas, and they talk about the caribou and the bear and stuff like that. They can mutually exist with the petroleum industry up there. As a matter of fact, a little fact, the caribou, which I know a little bit about, when they started drilling for oil up there in the 1970s, there were like 2,000 caribou. Now there's 1.5 million caribou. They love the pipelines. It's fine. It's not killing off anything. Yet I'm paying $100 to fill up my SUV. It's a little bit. I'm sorry. I don't mean to get emotional here. A dignified man.
Are you allowed to bang the table? I
am. I will. But I'm telling you, that is a big issue, right. And that's where you have this. You have this like make-believe land where the current administration is in Washington, and they said, it'd be really great if everyone just had solar panels and windmills out on their porch, and that's not going to get it done.
You're making me a little nervous because ultimately we need all the renewable energy we can get, and it does need some encouragement, particularly in terms of improving the technology. And we're seeing the military, which has usually been at the cutting edge, taking advantage of some renewable energy that will be very beneficial. I take in a position that has evolved. I always took the position that the northern slope of Alaska was fuel that could be available to us someday, but that we needed to start to develop other fuel. And I have some appreciation for the fact that once you go into the northern slope, which was protected by all the way back from President Eisenhower, that you're changing policy. And what environmentalists fear is that we'll then start to do it in other protected areas. So that was one reason why I said, let's not do that. It'll always be there. But my position today is that we need to start taking advantage of the fuels that we can get, not the fuels, but the natural fossil fuels that we can get on the northern slope, and make sure we keep the pipeline fully operating. Because parts of it are, the demand for it is slowing down as we've, taken out what we could already from the northern slope. So,
so for those of you scoring at home, we're both on the same page as far as
you were there sooner than I was.
No, Keystone, right?
Well, absolutely, Keystone.
Want to do Keystone? That's a no-brainer.
And I think that ultimately that the northern slope of Alaska should also be mine.
Okay.
But having said that, I think that we need to see some of those revenues promoting natural renewable energies.
Okay, let's talk just some raw politics here, because I think things are shaping up kind of nice for you. There is another candidate, I don't know if you know about this, but another candidate is running in the primary for the Republican nomination for
There are a few, more than one.
Really? Who other than...
Well, Brian Cahill would probably be in a primary. There's going to be a convention, and you'll probably see 5 people in contention. Okay. I suspect that 3 of us will probably primary. And the primary is August 14th. It's Tuesday, August 14th.
Right.
and looking forward to that.
Okay.
And so I'll have an opportunity to make my case. I'm hoping to win the convention, but I'm definitely in a primary win or lose the convention.
Okay, but you talked a little bit. You said when you're talking about the previous Linda McMahon, when she ran in 2010, you said in the New York Times, you said, I was watching an experiment in Connecticut, and the experiment was, well, in a blue state, let's try someone so wealthy that they can fund their entire race. That's what I saw, and it really ultimately failed. Do you think a United States Senate seat can be bought with $50 million in campaign money and put a mailer in everyone's box for 5 months straight and get it done? Well, or are you going to cop the 11th commandment where you're not going to say anything bad about another Republican?
Well, I'm just going to say the truth, what I think the truth is, and live with the consequences. First off, I was down in Washington co-chairing the Commission on Wartime Contracting, and I watched a race between my friend Rob Simmons and a very wealthy candidate named Linda McMahon.
Right.
She was able to convince people that if she spent her fortune, part of her fortune, she would be the next senator.
Right.
Rob made the case. He made a few cases. He said, but first off, you can't buy an election.
Right.
And secondly, he tried to make it clear to people that his experience would trump her ability to spend money and win the race. Right. He was never given the opportunity to be the candidate, so we'll never know if he would have beaten Dick Blumenthal.
Right.
But what we know is that Linda McMahon lost by 12%. She brought down the gubernatorial ticket, and she brought down at least one of the two congressional hopefuls that we had in the 4th District and the 5th District. And so the advantage I have that Rob doesn't have is we know that money can't buy a general election. We know that the way she spent it made people realize that she clearly wasn't a fiscal conservative. I mean, one of the questions I ask people is, if you can spend $50 million of your own money so recklessly, every right to spend the money, but if you could spend it so recklessly, how is she going to spend your money? She obviously doesn't have much of a sense of the value of the dollar. She could have spent half that amount and done better.
So, I mean, we have all seen this movie. We know how it ends. Why are we going to buy a ticket to the same show?
Well, that's the argument I'm making to the folks at the convention. Some feel, well, an obligation because she did it before, but we Republicans haven't won this seat in 30 years. And we're in danger of seeing this opportunity pass and not getting it back for 30 years. And I'm only 2 points behind the front-running Democrat. I beat the other Democrats in the race, and Linda McMahon is well behind. And the challenge she has is that her unfavorables are at 48, 47%. And it's her own doing. People saw the business she was in and didn't like it. And some Republicans find it objectionable that she would have given $9,800 to Nancy Pelosi to elect her speaker in '06 to defeat Nancy Johnson and Rob Simmons. They both lost, members of Congress from Connecticut, and then gave $11,000 to keep Nancy Pelosi as speaker. That is outrageous. And she helped my defeat. And if I had given basically $20,000 to elect Nancy Pelosi speaker, I wouldn't dare walk in any Republican town committee and ask for their support. So one thing I give her is she's got chutzpah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, back in your days when you were in the Connecticut legislature, you used to take a bicycle around the back hills of Stamford. Am I right?
You're right.
Okay, you were out there, you were on your bicycle, and you were meeting the people. And that's one thing that I think that you will have over Linda McMahon. When you talk about Linda McMahon, I don't know if she's coming out to town committee meetings. I don't know if she's coming on local cable access shows or anything like that.
Well, she's doing some fundraising events. I'm going to various town committees, and I'd love her to show up with me so we could respond to questions.
Fundraising? This is her fundraising event. How much you need? Let me get the checkbook out. Okay, let's go. Let's have another. There's her fundraising event.
Well, I'm not.
Where's your fundraising event? Where's your checkbook? Is it?
Do you want to look at the label here?
Yeah. It's a J.C. Penney.
I'm happy I didn't have a stain here as you did that.
My bad.
Well, the bottom line to it is that, you know what? the Republican voters are going to decide. There will be a primary on August 14th, and we'll all live with it. And I fully acknowledge that she can spend any amount of money she wants, and I'm not critical of the fact that she can spend her money, but I certainly note how she spent it.
Are there any debates scheduled, or are we waiting until the convention
I've asked
first?
for 5 before the convention and 5 after. She's agreed to 3 so far.
All right, all right. Would you come back on this show and
Absolutely.
debate live
So
TV
now,
call-ins?
am I being replaced by 2 guests right now? I just
No,
feel-
not at all. We have a guy from a Palestinian pastor from the Middle East, but he's cooling his jets here.
Well, I don't want him to cool his jets too
No,
long.
not at all, not at all. We got 5 more minutes with you.
5 more minutes.
We're going
Okay.
to squeeze. We're going to squeeze every little thing we can.
We're going to hold off all the Middle East questions.
Yeah, the Middle East. I mean, solving the Middle East, that should take about 15, 20 minutes. But getting you elected, getting a Republican elected the Senate.
You know, the Middle East is like no other place in the world. It's a very difficult place.
I'll tell you.
Can I ask about 2 things, because on time. Tax code you talked about, I think you said the word flatter, but you didn't say flat tax, but a flatter code? Is that something you're looking at, or what reform of the tax code?
Well, first off, one of the things you learn when you're there is the folks that manipulate the system the most, the lobbyists that get the biggest payback is manipulating the tax code.
Yeah.
And there are so many unbelievable write-offs for certain interests that most of us don't even know about. So I think you look at all of them, and you eliminate most of them. Maybe at the end you'll still have the charitable deduction and a mortgage deduction, but that's the only 2 that I could see surviving. And by doing that, you can lower the tax rate, you can get rid of 5 steps and maybe have 3. But in the end, lower tax rate, and not just for individuals, but when you tax employment, you're taxing jobs, and you're going to see less jobs. And by the way, I got to get this in before we leave.
Yeah, no,
the
you got
state of
time.
Connecticut has not seen any job growth for 20 years. There is a reason.
Now, wait. Say that again slowly. The state of Connecticut has not seen job growth for 20 years.
Yeah, no job growth, no increase in net jobs. You've seen some jobs increase, and you've seen others decrease, but the net is basically the same. And so what we have to do is recognize, well, why is that happening? When you tax wealth, wealth leaves. When you tax jobs, you don't see a growth in jobs. And the state of Connecticut has got to totally rethink what they've done. In New Jersey, the New Jersey governor cut spending.
Right.
He didn't increase taxes like was done here. And the end result is he now is able to cut taxes. He's actually able to become more competitive. In seeking to raise money, I've called folks that now have moved to Florida and Wyoming because of the taxes.
Yeah.
And I have spoken to people who've moved their jobs out of state. And then to pass a law in Connecticut that says that any employer with 50 employees or more has to give sick leave, not negotiated through collective bargaining, but mandated by the legislature, signed into law by the governor. What that says to an employer is, I've got 50 states I can choose to grow in. It ain't going to be Connecticut.
Yeah, there's guys that that attend our church that are decision makers in large corporations, and they're looking to expand in other places, and they're doing studies. Connecticut doesn't even come close.
Right.
It doesn't even come close.
We're at the very bottom. So we got to switch that, and we got to recognize why it's happening.
Yeah.
You have a call?
Call. You have a question for Congressman Chase?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. Yes, I have a question for ex-Congressman Chase. Actually, I have 2. The first one is recently a member of the Senate from Maine said she will not be running again because she just got disgusted because the not working together, can't get things done, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think about that? And my next part 2 is how much does a member of the Senate make? And thank you very much.
Good questions. Are you in this for the money?
The Senate makes, Senator make, I think, about $170,000. But the problem you have in the Senate is you have a millionaires club. They don't really care all that much about what they make because they have made so much money in the past. So it raises a point, do you want another millionaire? And then the second thing is, with regard to Olympia Snowe, what a incredibly outstanding member. And I can understand why she's worn down. But if I was in the Senate right now, I'd be going to the Senate floor every day and asking Senator Reid, the majority leader, when are you going to pass a budget. They haven't passed a budget in 138 days.
No, 1,000.
I meant 1,038.
Because I know that
1,038.
I went on your website and you got it on the ticker. 1038. It just
so
goes
I'm
and
gonna,
goes and
I'm
goes.
gonna, I would say, Senator, when are you going to pass a budget? And he'd give me some story, and then I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and then some of my colleagues are going to come to me and say, "Chris, you're not winning a lot of friends," and I'd say, "I don't care."
You don't like to go to the Georgetown cocktail party circuit, or been there, done that?
I think our country is on the edge, and we have a choice of moving forward or falling into the abyss. And I think really what happens, whoever's elected senator has to be willing to fight like hell at some of this stuff that we're seeing. It's pretty disgusting what we're seeing. But I also will tell you, I've always submitted legislation by finding a Democrat to co-sponsor. So I was able to be successful in the minority or majority by making sure I found someone on the other side of the aisle who believed in the legislation I had written or asked to be written, and that's why I was able to get things done. So you got to work with the other side, but at the same time, you got to be willing to speak out. And there's this code of silence about some of the crap that's going on down there from, frankly, both Republicans and Democrats. So we need to stir things up, but we need to work together.
My guest this evening has been Congressman Chris Shays. He is going to be running in a primary for the United States Senate here in Connecticut. You'll remember Joseph Lieberman is retiring. He's going on. Good friend. He might endorse you, though. I saw it. It's right here. You went and visited him. He might endorse you. Imagine that. Joseph Lieberman's seat is going to be open in the United States Senate this fall, this November. You'll have a chance, if things turn out, to vote for Congressman Chris Shays to take a Senate seat that's being held right now by Joseph Lieberman. This is the one shot we have here in Connecticut. We've had the Democrats. They're in control in Hartford. They're in control in Washington. Ask yourself, has it worked out? Do you have confidence in that? You think that's going to be a bright future? Or do we have a chance to have a proven maverick, a proven independent thinker, Chris Shays, go in there and really shake things up? I know this man. He doesn't care. When George Bush was going ahead with the surge, and everyone said he was crazy, there was one guy who's been to the war zone 18 times. How many times?
About 24.
24 times he went into harm's way because he had confidence. This man played hockey at Darien High School. Hockey players are generally tough guys.
Had a scar, lost a tooth.
He's had his teeth knocked out. This is the guy, Congressman Chris Shays. You're going to be seeing
Marty,
a lot more of him. And he doesn't got $50 million, so donate money to him too.
Do I stand up
and there's no YouTube video of him doing untoward things in tights like your candidate. So thank you so much for joining us. We want you to come back. We're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to have a Palestinian pastor from the Middle East. We're going to sort out the Middle East. We've got plenty of time, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
State, there are no extras, no fluff, no frills, no free lunch, no second helpings, no streets paved with gold, no promise, no certainty. In this state, life is a bitter struggle to survive with the least. It's home to 1 out of every 11 families in America. It's home to 1 out of every 6 children in America. It's home to more than 32 million
Welcome back to the Marty Heiser Show. As promised, we have an incredible guest with us to finish off the show. Azar, how do you pronounce his last name?
Azar Ajaj.
Azar Ajaj. His last name is spelled A-J-A-J. And you are the vice president of the Nazarene Evangelical Seminary.
That's right.
And what my vast viewing audience wants to know is, how is there a Palestinian Christian headquartered in Israel? How did this happen? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I mean, just to educational point, that in Israel there's 20% of the Israeli population are Palestinian Arabs.
Okay.
So out of the 7.5 million who lives in Israel, there's about 1.5 million Arabs lives in Israel, or Israeli Arabs, or Israeli Palestinian, which is all this complication. I think it's not an easy issue to explain. And 10% of the Arabs who live in Israel are Christians. So we're speaking about 150,000 Christian Arabs living in Israel. There's Arabs live in Israel, and they're Christian. Also, a small minority of these Arabs are evangelicals.
Okay.
So we're speaking about 5,000 evangelical who Arabs.
It keeps going.
It's a minority. It's a minority in a minority in a minority.
Okay.
And
so maybe for the average American, when they think of Israel, they think wall-to-wall Jewish people. But you're saying there's 1.5 million Arab Palestinians that live within the geographical area.
When the state of Israel was established, their people were living there, and most of these people were Palestinian ethnically.
Right.
And in 1948, again, when the state was announced, those who were living in Israel, Arabs or other nationalities, became Israeli if they wanted that, or they did not want that, or happy or not happy about it, so became Israeli citizens. So part of this, that's probably the Arab population who lives in Israel now, were the original residents of that country. Okay. So we're speaking about 1.5 million Arabs.
Well, walk us through. We've had, on this show, we have had Olympic athletes. We have had businessmen with 2 degrees from Harvard University. We've had motorcycle gangs. And all of them, they don't like to be called gangs. I think it's like motorcycle clubs. But all of them have this common experience, different backgrounds, but this common experience of having surrendered their life to Jesus Christ and the difference that made in their life. What's your story? Is that something that you've experienced, or how did you come to this point?
I think every testimony is a unique testimony by itself, because it testify about changing of life, a person that, as we believe that the person was dead in his sins and he's alive in Christ. So I believe that each of these testimonies should be a fascinating one. I grew up in a nominal Christian home that it's probably like many Americans who live in this area, probably, or other places. I'm not sure about Connecticut itself, but they probably, for a good family, good parents, they were taught a good morals and values, but not about God. Probably going to church, it's something that become a tradition once a week or once every holiday.
Christmas, Easter,
yes,
that kind of thing.
And a little bit more than that. Maybe it's for other clubs or church clubs or fun things, but nothing about relation with God. Now, I grew up in such home. My parents tried to teach us good values, but that these values are not coming from the Bible. It's just because we're good people. At the age of 14, I joined. I went to a school. It's a Baptist school in Nazareth. It's when I say a Baptist school, it's not only for the Baptists. It's run by the Baptist church, but it's open for the whole community in Nazareth. And my parents sent me there actually because it's a good school.
Okay.
Academic side, and it's also a good school from moral side and values. But nothing for them was, their mind wasn't the issue of spiritual teach or the biblical teaching there, or the nothing about spirituality. Anyway, God caught me there through the Bible classes, and the teacher of religion teacher made a great impact on my life. And my struggle was that I discovered that the Bible teaches that we all are sinners and we need forgiveness and the cross of Christ to be saved. And I always grew up trying to prove to my parents and to the community that I'm good because I am good.
Right, right.
And then I tried to prove that to God. So I started to do good things. Like I tried to, okay, God, I'll start reading the Bible every day, and I'll start to go more to church every day, every Sunday, or maybe to the Bible school. And until God brought me to a point that, and it was clear as crystal to me, it's not what you're doing for me, it's what I've done to you at the cross.
Wow.
You need to accept that, and to realize that you're a sinner and you can't please me but what you're doing, but to accept my gift to you, my son that died on the cross for you, and my life, the Holy Spirit that lives in you, that will lead you to do good things. At this point, I surrounded my life to him, and since that time, of course, with ups and downs in my Christian life, as any normal Christian, but God led me step by step until this time.
It's interesting. There's a verse in the Bible that says, by faith you are saved through faith, and not of yourself, not a result of works, lest any man should boast. But it's a gift of God, not as a result of works. And I think sometimes, I mean, there may be people that are even watching the show tonight that they're just trying to be good. If I just go to church more, if I stop swearing, or if I do some good things, that's going to somehow earn having a relationship with God. But it isn't that. It's this. And by the way, the phone number is 438-2003. And someone just called. I accidentally hit the wrong button. So if you have a question for our guest, don't hesitate to call 438-2003. We'll put you right on the air. I once heard too that Christianity isn't so much a religion. In other words, a framework of do's and don'ts. Go to church on Sunday, be a good person, give money to charities. It's not so much a religion, but it's this relationship with Christ.
I agree 100% with you, and I think this is the main point of Christianity, that we don't do good things to be saved, but we do. Because we're saved, the life of Christ in us leads us to do good things.
Yeah.
And this is the challenge for many people, because it's by nature we're not like this. We're built for, you do good things, you expect to get good things. And also the other religion in the world built on law, that you should do this, you should do this, should do this. But in Christianity, I mean, the only thing that we should do is that we should let the Spirit of God control us more and lead us in our life, what to do, and be open to His guidance in our life, and and the result of this will be good works.
Yeah, I've heard
people will see it and glorify our Father who's in heaven.
Yeah, I've heard it said like it's not good works for salvation, but it's good works from salvation.
Yes.
In other words, you don't do these good things so that you're able to earn salvation. But once you become a Christian, like an apple tree produces apples.
Exactly.
And that's the fruit.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to work at it. It doesn't have to force it out. It just by nature, by being an apple tree, you just produce apples. Yeah. Same thing with the Christian. The fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, all those things should just come out of our normal relationship with Christ and an outgrowth of that.
Exactly. But we should remember that they should not hinder us from seeking or allowing God to do good works through us. Because it's written in James, that it's like a dialogue. Two people are asking each other. One is saying, show me your faith without your deeds, but I'll show you my faith through my deeds. And, and the question, the issue there is, how do...
Hold on one second. Yeah. Hold on one second. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah, I was listening to your dialogue, and I know more you're a strict constitutionalist, and I wanted to know what you thought about the recent uproar over Sam Forum's comments about about he doesn't believe that there should be a separation of church and state. So I was curious what your personal...
Yeah, I think, I mean, when he said that he became sick over hearing JFK's speech about I'm not going to have Catholicism dictate my public decisions, or you making reference to that?
Well, that was, listen, if he said he became sick, that speech was given 50 years ago when he was like 3 years old. I doubt that. What I'm asking you about, there's a dialogue now about separation of church and state. I believe there should be a firm separation of church and state, because you're talking about Christianity tonight, but there's dozens of other religions that are very popular in America, let alone across the world. So
yeah, I do. I obviously believe in the separation of church and state. I don't let a person's religion dictate, my political views. Mitt Romney's a Mormon. I don't believe that Mormonism is Orthodox Christianity. I believe that there's some problems from a theological point of view. At the same time, I'm supportive of his candidacy, and I think the Republican frame of mind is the right way to go. Now, I do think that when you have separation of church and state, like what we have with Obamacare right now, where the state is dictating to the church what it will or will not do in regards to health care, I think that's as much a violation as someone who tries to take his religious beliefs and say, let's make it a law that you can't do certain things on Sunday because it's not.
Off from that. That was more about freedom of choice as far as abortions. And I understand dictating to a Catholic hospital what to do about a morning after pill, and also about abortions to a Catholic hospital is diametrically opposed to Catholicism. Okay,
well, just to wrap this up, I mean, I think I am a strict adherent to the separation of church and state, but I think that the Christian worldview has a lot to say in the public forum, and I would hate to see the public forum just eradicate any reference to God whatsoever. That being said, I think in America we have it about right. There is absolute freedom of religion. There's mosques, there's temples, there's Jewish synagogues on every street corner, and I think we've hit it just about right. But thanks a lot for the call. I appreciate it. What about that? Now, when people think of the Middle East,
yes,
there's such a cauldron of different cultures and different religions, and everyone's at each other's throats. I mean, right now, tonight, there's a very serious possibility that Israelis are going to attack Iran because Iran is producing a nuclear weapon, allegedly, and they have vowed to wipe out the nation of Israel. What does Jesus Christ have to say to all these warring factions? And you are the vice president of the Nazarene Evangelical Seminary right there in Nazareth, right in the middle of it. What does Jesus have to say? And you've got 4 minutes.
Okay, well.
Solve the problem.
I will summarize the gospel in 4 minutes. That's a great opportunity.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're looking for answers here.
Yes, I know. I don't have all the answers. And I'm not a politician, of course, and you're not asking me a political question. But I think that
from a theological,
I understand, and I appreciate this. It's very important. I think it is very important for Americans to understand that politics and it's not the only solution in the Middle East.
Politics is not the solution in America or anywhere. It's been
especially in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not expert in what's happening in the States here, and I think that I'm deeply convinced that the main solution for the Middle East is the gospel of Christ, that holds in it peace and hope for the people. We're speaking about a Middle East that is wounded, that has been going through war for thousands of years. I grew up in Israel, and I was born in 1966. 1 year after my birth, the 6 Days Wars happened, and after that, 7 years after that, the Kippur War happened, and then the Lebanese war happened, and then the Hezbollah war happened, and the first uprising, and the second uprising, and now we're witnessing a time of peace in Israel, relatively.
Right.
But what are we doing now? We're speaking about the next war.
Yeah.
So between the war and the next war, we have a time of peace where we speak about the next war. That's all what's happening in Israel, and when I look about the situation, I don't see any other hope for that nation, for that area, except the gospel of Christ that bring peace and hope for the people and reconcile enemies together, reconcile the Jews with the Arabs, the Christians with the Muslims, with one Savior and one Lord. Well, this is the way I see the solution for the Middle East. Because of that, I probably would encourage everyone, especially those Christians, when they look at their TV screens and see the news about Iran and Israel, see the news about Egypt and Syria, see the news about Yemen and Bahrain, to think that behind or in these countries there's a group of Christians that they're praying and trying to bring hope and peace to their nations, and to pray for these people, and find a way to support these people.
There was another gentleman who's here visiting the United States right now, who's from Iran.
Yes,
and he's a pastor, he's a Christian within Iran, and he says that the Iranian church is just growing and growing, and yet even right now there's a death sentence on an Iranian pastor.
That's right.
And this gentleman, what's his name again?
Isa.
His father was actually put to death by a Muslim group after he had been convicted in the courts. But yet, he's working with the Iranian people through the church, and he's seeing the gospel spread through the church in Iran. I don't think people realize that.
The minute that you experience Christ in your heart, and especially if you are Middle Eastern, you will understand that this is the only hope for the Middle East. There's no other hope. We tried everything. We tried wars. We tried peace conferences and peace negotiations, and nothing is bringing peace to the Middle East. I'm in the last 10 years in a country, and I'm from Nazareth. And you might be passing through the streets of Nazareth and find this bakery called the Peace Bakery, and this vegetable shop, Peace Vegetable Shop, and this Peace Meat and Peace Restaurant, and you can see that until that today. And we speak about peace, we read about peace, we pray for peace, and the least thing we have in the Middle East is peace.
I want to thank so much Reverend Heiser for being here. I really appreciate very much bringing the perspective from the Middle East. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And just like all these other guys, same thing. Surrendered your life to Christ and it made a difference. Join us next week on the Mighty Heiser Show. I have no idea what we're going to talk about, but I know it's going to be good. Right here, Thursday night, 9 to 10. What else are you going to do? We'll see you next week. Thanks again.